So welcome again to tonight's fiction reading. And thank you all for your support and encouragement to all of the graduates. I'm introducing Patricia and her novel featuring a dystopian world with a unique twist. The protagonists are indigenous two-spirit trans femmes kicking ass in post-apocalyptic present. Please and thank you. In this compelling work of speculative fiction, Patricia explores themes of survival, resilience, and identity in a civilization ravaged by climate disaster. Through the eyes of our two-spirit characters, we are invited to confront our own assumptions about gender, culture, power, and to imagine tomorrow. Even though post-apocalyptic Fresno feels a lot like today, the story is very much about the future, one deeply connected to its past. Now, the depiction of queerness is fascinating. So the two-spirit people are magic. Only they can operate a device that calls upon nature and memory to cure this world, the Tzitzimime. Patricia writes, "You said we came from the caves where the water springs in the mountains, and that we followed the waters down to Teco, where we learned how to care for the valley and the forest, and the moon created the Zachilla to keep the balance there, to talk with the spirits when the people forget." The novel is about remembering and the pursuit of life through history, and how the telling of stories is a salve in the wound of forgetfulness. The stupidity of now is one that pushes me desperately into the genre of speculative fiction. Right now, we look like frivolous, short-sighted, fidgety things, many of whom are obsessed with eradicating my trans cousins, labeling every uncomfortable thought CRT, and keeping intellectually defunct grifters out of jail. The rest of us are watching mortgage rates and waiting for heroes to grow out of our civility like a divine fungus. Tomorrow must be better than this. So I'm going to be led by Patricia anywhere with it. Still, the book is us, and like us, it must go through stages of life, including childhood, where we explore and survive the violent, chaotic adults within each. In this novel, we are thrown into a world that has been transformed by an environmental catastrophe. The land is barren, the dead are harvested, and the few remaining pockets of civilization are controlled by authoritarian regimes that seek to maintain their power at any cost. Against this backdrop of devastation and oppression, our characters navigate a world that is hostile to their existence on multiple levels. As indigenous two-spirit characters, they must grapple with the ways in which their identities are seen as threats by those in power. They must also navigate the complexities of their own cultural heritage as they struggle to find meaning and connection in a world where traditional ways of life have been disrupted or destroyed. The richest parts of the novel have to do with the relationships the characters have with their families and their communities. But above all, I just love to see queers in the apocalypse. I know we were at the beginning and will be at the finale. It is a joy to see the end of the world imagined with such grace and honesty, because yes, human beings are petty and selfish and violent and hard-headed and prideful to the point of insanity, but we are also kind and devoted. And when everything burns down and there's nothing between our asses and the earth, we still can love each other like there is no time. So join me in welcoming Patricia Flores Yrarrázaval as we journey into the world of the Tzitzimime.
I was most worried about as the thank you all so much for being here. Hoping to stand up for making me a little bit warmer. I really want to thank all of my loved ones who made it out here from all over, really to support me, and everyone who's hopefully watching from home. As long as my yaya and my auntie figured out how to use Zoom, I really hope they'll do it. If not, I'll send a link. I really want to thank all of my loved ones really for teaching me how to tell a story, because I think that something that I'm trying to accomplish with this book is really to show that a story can be told with communities, not just one person, because stories don't exist in a vacuum. We make these things together, and they bind every part of our life, to the smallest speck of dirt, to the smallest drop of water, are bound up in stories that make all of us. So that's really what I hope to accomplish with this book. And Yeah, I want to thank definitely all of the people in the communities involved in helping guide me through this process. Definitely thank you, Venita, so much for all of your support throughout the MFA and helping me to find my voice in the story and convincing me to put it in the first person too. That was definitely really helpful for me. And I also want to thank just everyone in the MFA department, Professor Maider and Rajavar, who really also put in a lot of their insight that helped me grow this story. And I want to also thank all of the specific communities that are involved in this story, right? I've been trying to make sure to have interviews with people, across the, Fresno, Central Valley, and Southern California as well to shape this story together with these communities. So I definitely want to thank the Yakut, Mono, and Miwok communities and nations of the Central Valley, the historic Black communities of Fresno and Riverside, the migrant communities that have passed through all of these areas, and the land and the water itself is famous also. So, and thank you, Venita, for that great explanation of the story. That was that needs to be in a blurb or something. The scene that we're dropping into, that I'm going to read from today, is centered on the character Marina, who, as mentioned, is a transcendent two-spirit character, who is forced to operate this machine called the Tzitzimime to be able to create rain. Basically, in Fresno, in the year 2072, the land is drought wracked, and most of the city has been abandoned, except for people with disabilities and their caretakers, as well as a wealthy group of people that live underground in a luxury shelter underneath Fresno Airport, run by a corporation called the Salvos Corporation. And so it's actually based on real things that are happening now. Wealthy people across the U.S. are building shelters underground right now. And they use the National Guard to force these people with disabilities and their caretakers to grow food above land for the wealthy, using this machine called the Tzitzimime and our character Marina to bring the rain and grow that food. And so, right as we enter this scene, Marina is meeting with the leaders of this wealthy city, the new Fresno City Council and the CEO of the Salvos Corporation, Peter Ventulo. And they've just told her that she's being forced to create even more rain than she was before, when knowing that it's physically draining her body and helping her to descend into madness by using this machine, which relies on her telling stories to be able to think of it. And so that's where we're coming into this scene where she's talking with the new Fresno City Council and that our villain, Peter Ventura. The holographic map of Fresno condensed into a small ball of light before springing out again into the form of a three-dimensional diagram, featuring a cylinder that descended vertically through 7 evenly interspersed horizontal discs, each labeled L1 through L7 from top to bottom, with smaller, harder to make out text next to each label. The top of the cylinder was housed in a building that looked strangely familiar until I realized it was the Fresno Airport. So that must mean that the diagram beneath it must be. This is the overall layout of New Fresno, Councilmember Hahn explained, almost as if they read my thought. The bunker itself extends down about 164 feet into the earth, with the 7th and lowest level built into the confined aquifer to keep the hydrogen production plant cool and provide a direct, energy-efficient source of water to be treated on the level above it and pumped up through the rest of the bunker, all the way back up to you all up here. But therein lies the problem. Originally, the sudden, drastic population decline that took place in Fresno after the riots made it much easier to keep the aquifer levels up, since we were the only ones left to drink the water. When the social event initiated lockdown began almost 7 years ago, the water levels were averaging in about 150 feet most days, which was considered amazing back then, a big touted success of the water rationing policies. After a couple of years of just relying on seasonal rainfall, mind you, this is before you were old enough to use the Tzitzimime, the water levels went back up to 100 feet, which, beyond being fucking miraculous, built up more pressure on the water coming into the hydrogen production. And if you've taken physics class, that's the fucking jackpot right there, my friend. The higher the water pressure, the faster the water moves back up into the bunker without needing to expend as much energy to pump it up artificially. It also means we have enough water to produce a surplus of hydrogen fuel cells. We're even able to ship out cells to other bunkers and military installments, and even big cities like LA and San Francisco, keeping them afloat as everything fell apart across the country. But Tom faltered, suddenly too timid to meet my eyes. One thing we didn't anticipate was having to provide for the 4,000 refugees and survivors we took in with the help of the National Guard. It was the right thing to do, of course, they added hastily. And admittedly, it became necessary when our hydroponic systems began to break it down a year in, and we realized we were going to need people above ground producing food if we were going to survive. Tom looked pointedly over at Venturo, as did Councilwoman Roman. Hey, the guy who sold them to me promised they could run independently for about 10 years, Venturo barked back defensively, before adding in a hurt tone. He was highly recommended by my tech bros over in Silicon Valley. Whatever the case, the population boom plus the increased demand for fuel cells in LA, Mammoth, and San Francisco all started adding up. And around 4 years ago, the aquifer levels started falling again. A year ago, they dropped to 120 feet. Tom said with tension in their voice as they tapped and swiped up on their tablet. A rippling blue water level appeared around the diagram of New Fresno, just below the fifth floor. Suddenly, it dropped down to just above the bottom of the sixth floor. Now we're looking at 140 feet, and we're expecting to drop to 150 in the next month or two. We're already seeing subsidence around several of our key structural supports. Without the water holding it up, the dirt above the aquifer starts sinking down with enough force to twist pipes and force concrete apart. It already knocked out one of our air vents for the sixth floor, and we had to evacuate an entire wing at the first level due to structural instability. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. If the water levels sink below the hydrogen production plant, it's going to take a lot more energy to keep it cool and to keep pumping up water into the plant, into our water treatment system. We don't have enough stored fuel cells to handle that amount of work. New Fresno will be powerless and basically uninhabitable within a week. The wake of Ham's revelation seemed to bend the backs of the other council members into even deeper slums, despite the fact that it wasn't news to them. I, on the other hand, was dumbstruck. I just listened to Ventura ramble on for over an hour about some bullshit about rebuilding America and fulfilling his hick grandpa's dumbass prophecy. Come to find out, he's just trying to keep him and his little rich friends from having to come out of their castle and live among us peasants on the surface. 4,000 extra people isn't enough to explain a drop in the aquifer levels like that, my mom pointed out, breaking the silence. You all must be shipping out a lot of fuel cells. Why can't you just tell military command in LA and San Francisco that you need to cut down on production to keep the plants in the city sustainable in the long run? Suddenly, I understood. You're not just following military orders, are you? I asked Ventura with confidence that surprised even me. I could practically see steam beginning to form off his head. You're wasting our water to turn a profit. Our residential clientele expect a certain standard of comfort and luxury while they remain in shelter with us. Councilmember Solis cut in before Ventura could respond. I'd never heard him speak before. His voice was restrained but commanding and clear, each syllable enunciated as if they were machine typed. His unblinking eye contact made me feel strangely unnerved. For that reason, this facility's administration maintains contact and trade relationships with a variety of surviving businesses and similar secure settlements across the country in order to ensure that our customers continue to have access to the finest medical equipment, air and water filtration technology, home furnishing, exotic meats, designer suits, original paintings, and rare sculptures. Tom interrupted with raised eyebrows. Don't forget about the endangered tigers, Councilman Singh added with a laugh. Are y'all forgetting that this is a business? Ventura shouted, pounding the arms of his chair with his hands for emphasis as he jumped to his feet. He began pacing the room as we fell silent. I know y'all like to play dress up when we come up here and put on a show for the welfare line, so they can all go on pretending we still live in that pretty innocent little democracy we all knew and loved when we were kids. But the show's over, folks. I'm not the mayor, I'm the goddamn CEO. You're not a city council, you're my good-for-nothing employees. And New Fresno, the intake bay, and this entire airport is all Salvo's corporation property, meaning every breathing body within these walls is under my command. Even the guard base is Salvo's property, which we're happy to lease back to the government at zero cost in exchange for their protection of this facility and its residents. But let's get one thing straight. I don't take orders from anyone. That's the beautiful thing about this country. Our laws, our very constitution was made to defend and empower entrepreneurs like me because we're the only ones with the daring and the vision to chisel this country into something great. He stopped pacing in front of his armchair and turned to me. Look, I tried to be a gentleman with you, but since you want to act like Miss Tough Shit, I'm just going to give you the man, Ventura spat, smiling a little at the obvious twitch of anger in my eyes. Either you start calling them clowns in every night for the next 6 weeks, starting tomorrow, or recut all medical supplies and pharmaceutical deliveries to the surface. Let you deal with your sick and your crippled without our generosity. See how you feel after that. My mom's entire body tensed next to me, her face frozen and drained of its usual flesh. Even the council members looked shocked. Venturo, you can't, Councilman Singh began to protest. The hell I can't, Venturo shot back. You people were always talking about how you wanted equal rights. Well, here it is. You want to withhold the water? Fine. We'll withhold the medicine. Fair is fair. Venturo laughed spitefully. I don't think you realize who you're messing with here, little girl. You're not playing chicken with a hen. You're playing chicken with a cock. I didn't know if I was more disgusted, scared, or angry. My hands balled into fists at my side. My heart pounded in my chest as the faces of every neighbor, friend, and loved one in the camp with a disability or an illness flashed before my eyes. Even the most able-bodied workers in the camp struggled with constant pain, respiratory issues, kidney problems, or diabetes. Lifetimes of physical labor had already ground many of their bodies down to brittle shells prior to the collapse. Others found themselves with new conditions every year. We were forced to walk through the toxic haze that haunted our city streets long after it first appeared after the riot. Without medicine, everyone would suffer. The number who might die was too painful to consider. He had me back into a corner and fucking knew it. Fine, I finally conceded. I'll do it, just don't hurt anyone, please. Ventura whistled wistfully. Jesus Christ, took you long enough. Like pulling teeth with you. You think living up here in the wasteland would teach you a bit more about survival and self-interest. Just goes to show you, stupid don't discriminate. He tipped his cocktail back and drained the remaining half in one gulp, before slamming it down on the coffee table and clapping his hands together. Well, I, for one, am sick of being topside. The air up here is so pedestrian. Let's get back to the lift. I'm getting hangry. Even that pig slop we feed to the field hands has my stomach growling. So long, Sugar Plum. Council members Loudbin, Romero, and Solis will be in touch regarding progress and storm update. My mom and I remained in our seats, stunned and defeated. A few of the council members offered us grimacing smiles as they walked out that were either sympathetic or pitying. I couldn't decide. Either way, they could choke on it for all I cared. They could offer all the false sympathy they liked, but ultimately Venturo's ruthless despotism served them. They didn't want to give up the comfort and safety of New Fresno any more than he did. Whether by carrot or stick, they got what they wanted. Venturo stopped in front of my mom and I on his way out and leaned in far too close for my comfort, so that his eyes were level with mine. I could smell a faint trace of rotting meat on his breath when he spoke. And just so we're clear, if either of y'all tell anyone about this little deal of ours, then we'll go ahead and withhold the medicine anyhow, whether or not you're bringing it in the way. Can't have you inciting insurrection up here. Hell, we might as well freeze everyone's commissary accounts while we're at it, so that each time their bellies growl with hunger, they remember it was you that went and stirred up all this trouble. Do I make myself clear? I curled my lip in disgust and stood up, forcing him to back away a few steps and remember our height, as he had to look up to continue to maintain eye contact with me. Crystal clear, Mr. Mayor. He smiled and turned and left. My mom stood, looked at me, then wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my chest. I held her back. After a few moments, we followed Ventura out. That night, I tossed and turned in my bunk bag in the intake bay concourse, dreaming of the night the guard took us from our homes and forced us to join the internal refugee camp. I kept waking and falling back into the dream, narrowing in each time on the memory of Mako, my mom, and I running across the tarmac to the towering glass wall of the terminal, just before the fire began. As I looked back towards the protesters surrounding the airport, a dull buzzing began in my ears, slowly growing in intensity until it felt like the entire earth was shaking. In the dream, I struggled to keep my balance, and as I looked around for the source of the buzzing, a sudden shadow passed above us in the night, casting the moon in darkness, and somehow slashing open the clouds as it swept across the sky, leaving their bellies bleeding smoke across the city. Then the buzzing culminated in a boom, just as a light flashed in the direction of the riots, nearly blinding me. As my vision returned, I saw the entire world around me on fire, the inferno closing in on me just before I awoke. After the fifth time I nearly fell out of my bed, heart thumping and drenched in sweat, I decided to pray to my great-grandmother, my abuela Maria, to sing me the lullaby she used to sing all the children, the one my mom sang to me when my abuela was gone. After a while, I resigned myself to lying awake the rest of the night, when suddenly I smelt the scent of rose petals pass over me on an inexplicable breeze, the same scent of roses that my abuela used to plant at our home in Fresno. But rather than a lullaby, I began to make out the distant rhythm of the frogs and the toads at Leaky Acres, and my heart slowed to match them. I smiled, remember our dancing earlier, in an old story from my abuela's pueblo. Into the toad's melody, I finally drifted into restful sleep. The next evening, I walked alongside the rest of the camp on the dirt path between the recharge basins at Leaky Acres, to the center of the man-made lakes where the Tzitzimime was assembled. The pillars surrounding it glowing soft blue, red lights blinking among the branches wherever wires connected to the pillars and the tree. My feet felt leaden as I forced myself up the steps of the round platform to the towering teotlate tree that had been my companion since birth, growing beside me as the world crumbled and reformed again around us. Its tender evergreen leaves wafted lightly in the breeze, carrying the tree's cedar scent gently down to me as I turned to take my seat in the hollow of its trunk. The smell once comforted me, reminding me of the sweat lodges my mom sometimes took me to as a child. Now it only turned my stomach, foreshadowing the pain I was about to endure. As the children of the camp settled into the first few rows of seats before me at the bottom of the platform and the adults behind them, I placed the wired patches that connected me to the Tzitzimime on the nape of my neck, my chest, and on my mid-back. I felt the jolt of electricity run through me briefly, a taste of what was to come. Although the voices and figures rose and danced before me as usual, it was easy to pick out the story I wanted to tell. My abuela had chosen it for me the night before. I began, stifling my gasp as the pain arced through me, rooting me to my seat as tingling tendrils of electricity hooked themselves beneath my skin and shot up to each branch of the teotlate, pulling my pain-ridden consciousness in as many directions as I told the story. Long ago, when the Spanish still held us as captives on our own land, the priests and the hacendados told the people of our pueblo, "Go now to the forest of Tamazulsi, to the forest of the little toads, and cut down all the trees that grow along the river there. We need wood for our stables and for the church where you will become true Christians. Go on, don't be lazy." But one of the elders, an old man named Don Pablo, told the priest, "But Father, we never cut wood there. That forest belongs to the Lama Tamazulsi, to the old lady toad. She allows us to cut wood from any of the other forests around here as long as we leave an offering. But she forbids us from cutting the trees by the river because that's where her children play." The priest didn't listen though. "Go on, stupid old man, enough of your superstitions. You're just lazy like the rest of your people. Go where there will be no food for you all this week, and you alone will feel the cat of nine tails on your bare back." Everyone ran to grab their axes and go to the forest then, because everyone knew Don Pablo would not survive the cat of nine tails, a whip with knots along each of its 9 cords. The people of the village did as they were told and cut down as much wood as they could from the forest of Tamazulsin. When they returned, the priest set them to building the first church in the town, and then to building stables for Don Santiago Lepe, a Spanish soldier who ruled the land. But the next morning, the village was in chaos. Half of the town's children had become deathly sick overnight, especially the children of Don Lepe. Don Pablo's own granddaughter, Metzochi, was sick, her skin clammy and covered in warts. Don Pablo begged the priest and Don Lepe to go ask the Lama Tamazulsin forgiveness, but in their pride, they refused. Crying, Don Pablo took his granddaughter to the river and pleaded with the spirit of the water to forgive him and cure Metzochi. Just then, the Lama Tamazulsin, the old lady toad, appeared to Don Pablo. She told him that she knew it was not the people, but Don Lepe and the priest who ordered them to cut down the trees that grew along the river. She told him to leave his granddaughter there beside the river and to take her to the church that they had just built. "But I can't leave my granddaughter here. What if something happens to her?" "My children will protect her while we are gone. If you do this for me, when we come back, I will cure her." Don Pablo trusted the old lady toad and picked her up carefully, placing her in his morral. He walked back to the village, leaning on his staff for support because that old lady toad was heavy. Finally, he arrived at the church and he strode inside where he found the priest. "Don Pablo, what are you doing here?" the priest asked. "I've come to ask you to make peace with the Lama Tamazulsin, the old lady toad. I brought her here with me so she can speak with you." Don Pablo took the old lady toad from his morral and placed her gently on the floor. The priest shrieked with fright. "Don Pablo, por favor! Why did you bring a dirty old toad into our church? You're still possessed of your old pagan ways, and you'll be punished with it. The priest ran for his cat o' nine tails and began to swing at Don Pablo, when suddenly the voice of the Lama Tamasulsin filled the room with the booming echo of her power. Don't you dare strike my child. You've already heard enough of them. Tear down this temple of death and return the wood to my forest, or I will drive you out myself. The priest cowered in fear. This is the work of the devil. Get behind me, Satanas. This angered the old lady toad even more. I am older than your devil, wiser than your God, and more loving than any mother you have ever known. Go now, or I will bring this temple down upon you. But the priest took up his cat o' nine tails again and lashed at the Lama Tamasulsin, striking her where she stood on the ground. As soon as the cords hit her body, she burst into flames that shot out into each direction of the church, catching on the pews, the walls, the tapestry, and finally the cross of the altar. The priest ran, but fell and hurt his leg. Don Pablo tried to help him, but the priest pushed him away, calling him a devil worshiper and a witch. Left with no choice, Don Pablo ran out of the burning church and watched helplessly as the flames spread all the way to Don Lepe's hacienda, burning the stables and the soldiers' big house to the ground. Don Pablo returned to the forest to retrieve his granddaughter, only to find her awake and laughing, playing with the little tadpoles along the shores of the river. Don Pablo rushed to take her in his arms. I told you I would cure her. Don Pablo turned to find the source of the voice and saw a beautiful young woman appear before him, with long dark hair, skin like the clay-reddened soil beneath them, and dressed like the holy woman of the old days, turquoise and jade adorning her dark green dirma and her deep blue skirt and repeating, I thought the priest had killed you. O Ilama Tamasulsin, I'm forever in your debt. Thank you for saving my granddaughter, my Metsochi. I've only saved you for now, my child. More priests will come back and more soldiers too. It is too dangerous for me to remain here in this form. When the priests come back and build their church again, make a statue of me as I appear to you now. Make it from the clay that reddens the soil by the spring where my river is born. They will call me by the name of their mother, but you will know who I am. You will bring me the asochi, the white water lilies that grow by the spring and down in the marshes. You will place the asochi on my altar each new moon, and in this way I will know that you still love me, and I will always protect the people of this village. Don Pablo did as he was told, and taught his granddaughter to do the same, and the things that the old lady toad said came to pass. And so it was that the Lama Tamasulsin became La Virgen de Tamasulsin, and she still looks after the people of her village today. The end, Yaxlami. Kalakanonakas Oxentlapal Palquiza, Yanik Molcava, Maakin Techilia Oxen. Water sprang to my eyes as the story released me, and I slumped back in my seat, leaning into the trunk for support as the world slowly stopped turning around me, and reality began to take form. I finally registered the children laughing and cheering, and the adults' polite applause. I tried my best to smile and raise a hand in thanks. They didn't pay attention to me for long. They all gazed up expectantly at the sky, some holding out their hands or their tongues for the first drop of rain. Seconds passed, then minutes, as I tried to regain my strength and fight the nausea off long enough to get up from the hollow of the Teotlate tree. I heard people sigh in disappointment as they turned and began to walk back to the guardsmen awaiting them at the entrance to Leafy Acres to escort us back to the intake bay. I stumbled down the steps of the platform but managed to gain my footing before hitting the bottom. I stepped out onto the dirt surrounding the Tzitzimime and immediately fell to my knees, heaving my dinner and breakfast and whatever was left of the feast from last night out onto the ground in shivering waves. My mom ran up and wrapped her shawl around me, but I remained clutching the earth until I was sure I had no more food left to lose. I looked up to see that no one else in the camp had even turned back to see if I was all right. I looked back down to my own vomit in the dirt. Suddenly, a ripple appeared in the bile pools before me. Then another. Then a cold droplet hit my hand, my cheek. It was just a drizzle, but it was enough for the kids to start running back to play in the puddles and watch the raindrops form rippling rings in the basin. It stopped after 15 minutes, and everyone turned back and headed home, slightly less disappointed than before. My mom helped me back to my bunk, and I slept through the next day. My mom told me it didn't really start coming down until midnight, when most people were already asleep. After 4 days of my stories, Leafy Acres overflowed. Thank you.